Welcome to Utilizing AI, the podcast about enterprise applications for machine learning, deep learning, and other artificial intelligence topics. Each episode brings experts in enterprise technology together to discuss AI in today's data center. Today, we're discussing blue-collar AI, bringing AI to the enterprise from a sort of consultative and operational perspective. Let's meet our guest, Per Nyberg.
Hi, my name is Per Nyberg. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Stradigi AI.
Thanks for joining us, Per. I'm Stephen Foskett, organizer of Tech Field Day and publisher of Gestalt IT. You can find me on Twitter at @sfoskett. So, Per, I was having a briefing with Stradigi AI the other day because that's sort of what we do for Gestalt IT. We learn about new companies and technologies and what they do. And the thing that really stuck in my head was this sort of practical approach that the company takes toward AI. In other words, you're not looking at it as a science project or a mathematics, doctorate. You're looking at how you can bring AI to the enterprise in a really practical way. So I imagine that that's something that's near and dear to your heart personally as well. How do you approach AI when a company comes to you and says, "Hey, we got to get some of that AI goodness"?
Yeah, great question. And I think that for just about every company that's looking at AI, often they'll come in with some notion of benefit, right? And I think increasingly companies are looking for value out of their investments, right? And so our approach is really start with the business question. So it's not AI for the sake of AI or machine learning for the sake of machine learning. It is really you start with, what's the business question? What's the use case? What are they expecting to get out of this project or, their sort of implementation and really start there. And what we've found is starting there just drives not only sort of the right metrics and examination of the metrics, but even down to what data is required in order to support that use case. So it's kind of an organizing function, if you will, to really, we feel, look at AI from a more practical, business-oriented perspective.
And in terms of, I guess, what you're actually doing, so what does the company get, or what does the customer get from the company on these engagements?
Yeah, so we're an AI SaaS platform provider, right? And so, our customers use the platform to build models on their own. And those models would be, could be several models, but ultimately it's to support this for, let's say, for example, demand prediction, right? So where our discussions first start is around exactly that. So the customer will say, we've got challenges in our supply chain. We've got, thousands of SKUs, 9-month lead times. We're struggling to make accurate predictions in, inventory purchases. We would like to use data-driven decision-making to improve that. So that's kind of the starting point. And so in our first engagements is exactly around that. We then look at what data is required to support it. And in our first sort of engagement, the steps of our engagement, we'll actually build those models with the customer, show them the results, the actual results that they can benefit from using their data. And then from that point on, they become users of the platform, and they're doing this on their own, right? But sometimes it's that first case of seeing what data can do for their businesses, right? And it varies greatly depending on, quite frankly, kind of the maturity or experience of the organization with using machine learning and even just using data for these types of decisions.
So let's talk about that a little bit then, because I know that, there are a lot of different companies in a lot of different spaces doing a lot of different things. What problems do you look for that are particularly amenable to using AI? And I guess maybe we can also say what kind of AI, because that's an important consideration as well. I mean, I assume that most people are talking about sort of deep learning or machine learning when they're talking about this, but what kind of problems are you looking for in a company and you say, aha, that's the one that I should apply this machine learning solution to, or something like that?
Yeah, so maybe a few dimensions there. One is that I mean, machine learning, as you know, is a horizontal technology. It's not any specific vertical or use case. It's math, right? So in general, you could say that, you know, just about any problem, business challenge that has data, you could apply AI to it. It's obviously a little bit more complex than that, but that's generally the case. And if you look at, you know, where most companies have a tremendous amount of data that they've been gathering, it could be around their customers, for example, right? That's actually one of the what we see as one of the sort of fastest growing, most important areas is just around, you know, customer behavior modeling. But it could be back office data, supply chain, kind of demand prediction that I mentioned earlier, all the way through to, let's say, IoT data for manufacturing. So it's, you kind of look for areas that one have the data, because that is a necessary prerequisite for AI. So you look for the data, but more importantly, it tends to be around the business challenge, right? And again, AI is not the solution to everything. So we get customers who approach us with a business problem, and we actually respond to them that, you know, you could use very conventional statistical methods to solve those things. You do not need machine learning.
It seems that many AI applications are really focused, though, on finding you know, unknown needle types in unknown haystacks. You know, essentially, you know, you're looking for outliers. You know, other AI problems that are being solved by businesses tend to be of the sort of find me a novel solution to this question kind of, you know, challenges. In other words, you know, cut through all the potential paths that we could take and just find one that seems to work. Does that match your expectations? Are there other sort of general problems that companies are solving with, well, specifically with like neural network, you know, machine learning?
Yeah, I would actually frame it that, so certainly outliers is one, right? Anomalies, right? And there's use cases around fraud detection. It could be even identifying defects in manufacturing, let's say in the actual products themselves. But I would also add that, you know, you're looking for relationships in the data. I think that's probably one of the most important ones. And the other is just the kind of complexity of the data, multidisciplinary data, right? So again, going back to the demand prediction example, you have the ability with deep learning to start adding in other variables. It could be weather, for example, right? Things that are unconventional, right, for most businesses. So you can, the power of these methods is that you can look at very complex relationships. And I think that, you know, that notion of complexity is probably one where it's that tipping point for a lot of companies. An example would be, I don't know, you're a food supply company, and you know, you could live happily with Excel spreadsheets and one person looking at this, let's say once a week or once a month. But suddenly the disruption in your supply chains, the pace of the business, either competitive or just being, you know, driven by your customers, knowing where to stock inventory, to optimize logistics and transportation, to reduce inventory spoilage. You see how it starts to get very complex, and it's kind of beyond the human. So, you know, we really see a lot of these use cases that I think are most impactful for businesses are often where AI should be viewed as a tool, which is just kind of making your current teams better, right? I mean, these are very smart individuals. It's just that their Excel spreadsheets are into triple letter columns and whatever number of rows, and it's too much for them to be able to make sense of. And so the other aspect is that, you know, when customers look at how they build models and they look at their data, often to your point about kind of unknowns or needle in the haystack, they actually end up learning about what it is that drives decisions. And it could be, let's say you're looking at customer churn. and you're trying to understand, okay, so what is it that would, cause the classic telecom customer to cancel their contracts? And it could be, aspects of their profiles that just were so deeply buried that you didn't know that those were the drivers. So one of the things that machine learning can do is actually tell you what features in your data are driving the decisions, right? And that kind of spurs on another investigation by the subject matter expert to further investigate these features. And it could be data that the company is not actively collecting today, but now know or understand that they need to actively collect it. So it's really this kind of journey of better understanding your business drivers through the lens of your data to make better decisions.
So another aspect that I'd like to zoom in on there, and one of the things that you mentioned, is this idea of multidisciplinary expertise. In other words, an organization may have expertise in, security and in networking and in, logistics and in IT or, different areas. But not all those people can see all the data. Not all those people know all the data. And, an AI model could theoretically cross those disciplinary lines. I think that that's sort of what you were talking about in there as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. But again, the model is it's just math, right? And so it certainly has the capabilities of looking again for those relationships between different types of data, multidisciplinary data, and but I think that's where it comes back to this human in the loop. You still need that subject matter expert to make sense of it, because there could be those kind of classic false positives in there as well, right? And at least for now, I think most use cases really are reliant on that human expertise, that subject matter expertise, to be able to make sense of these things. AI, in most cases, is just a tool that helps them, makes understand again their data. Yeah.
So I want to turn the page here a little bit too, because I know another area of focus for you all, and something I think that's pretty interesting to our audience, is how do you translate a lot of this sort of egghead stuff into real world business speak? I mean, how do you go to somebody who's not a, let alone an AI expert, but a, computer systems expert or a data scientist? How do you go to somebody just in the business and say, hey, this is a good solution for you because whatever? I mean, what is the whatever? What is the pitch to an ordinary business person?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and maybe I'll back it up a little bit. And I think one of the, AI has a tremendous amount of promise. I don't think there's any debate about that. I think it's interesting when you look at what the kind of the challenges have been, or the roadblocks, or the kind of limiters have been to not, and I wouldn't even just say the adoption of AI, but the use of AI in day-to-day business decisions. Companies have been exploring and how AI could be used for many years now, but most reports would say that the percentages are still pretty low of those using it in production, right? So that kind of tells you something. And so for AI to really live up to its promise, it needs to be more accessible, like any technology, right? It needs to be able to be used on a day-to-day basis the same way that, I don't know, like an Excel spreadsheet is used today, right? If we as a community can get to that point and really put that power in the hands of literally anybody, that's when it's going to be game-changing for companies. And so today you've got this scenario where there's kind of the haves and the have-nots, right? So the larger companies have the ability to invest in these large specialized teams of data scientists and PhD machine learning experts to build a handful of use cases, and that's okay for them. But what you're finding is that you've got the have-nots in the industry where companies simply just can't get started. So even with the large companies, as I mentioned, it might be just a few use cases that they're focusing on. So maybe in a bank, they're focused on fraud detection, but the marketing department doesn't have the tools to use to sort of leverage all the data they've been collecting about their customers. So even within these large organizations, there's kind of these pockets. So all this to say that AI needs to have a degree of automation such that you don't have to build these from scratch. You don't have to be a machine learning expert, and really, kind of make your current teams better. Now that could be a biologist or it could be a business analyst. And that's really kind of the pitch, if you will, when you go to customers, is like, you have the expertise today to be able to use these tools because of the automation, because of the user experience. They can in fact build and deploy very sophisticated models without having to be, again, a machine learning expert.
I guess the flip side of that discussion, though, is that considering the level to which popular culture kind of glorifies artificial intelligence and robotics and so on, we have to think also of how do we express to companies what this technology can't do and isn't. Because I think a lot of people, when they hear AI, they assume we mean Mr. Data from Star Trek or the Terminator or something like that. Or maybe they even just assume sort of pop culture AI that can do marvelous things, the classic, crime show, enhance, let me see that face, let me see that license plate. And, I think that maybe there's also a parallel challenge where, we in the industry have to start figuring out how to express the limits of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. So a few thoughts there. One is that, there's always going to be some degree of, let's say, call it fundamental research that maybe border on a little bit of science fiction, and that's okay. That's great. So I think it's a little bit of everyone needs to decide where their focus is, and certainly, ours is very much on industry, right? And how we can put AI in the hands of business people, and that goes back to what I was mentioning earlier. You frame it up as a business problem, and that tends to kind of reduce the science fiction aspects of it, or and there's often some education that's required, because there's no question that a lot of people really don't understand what it does. They may not even understand that it requires the data that it does. But I think if you start with a business problem, what is of value to the business, it tends to sort of resolve many of those things on its own.
All right. So I guess in a nutshell, what is the value that businesses are deriving here? I mean, what's the elevator pitch for a CEO or a CEFO, maybe? I mean, what do you say if you meet somebody and they say, "Oh, what could AI do for me?"
Yeah, I think it really comes back to being able to improve your day-to-day decision making through data. That is fundamentally what it is. The ability to put in the hands of your business analysts a tool whereby you can leverage and make sense of very fast-moving, insightful data, so that you can move the needle within your organization. Right. That's fundamentally what it is at a high level. The data shows that the companies that have adopted AI, have adopted, a digital approach, enjoy faster revenue growth, for example. Right. So there are hard numbers behind this as well that do demonstrate those companies that have been leaders in this space, that they are seeing the benefits.
So you're going into an organization and you're bringing in, a pitch for AI. They implement it, they hire, they develop, they, apply technology. What does this organization look like in a few years? What kind of people are working there, and what are they doing in the future once they've adopted this technology?
Yeah, great question. I think that what we see in organizations is that there's kind of this role of the business analyst that is evolving, right? So a business analyst, I mean, they've been around for a long time, obviously, and And their role is really around, again, driving better decisions, informed decisions, data-driven decisions within an organization, right? So they've always had that. I think what we're seeing is that there's a greater emphasis on the data side of things, right? Understanding the power of the technology, and to your earlier point, the limitations as well, right? So being able to advise the company on where these, technologies could be applied. And so we're seeing that today already. And you're also seeing this within MBA programs. There's a number of MBA programs out there that now have, MBA major in data analytics as an example. So you're starting to see the kind of early stages of the workforce and the graduates starting to evolve to really, I guess, have a better ability to understand, again, the power of data and to bridge that gap between the business and IT in these organizations. And I think that's fantastic. I think ultimately, as I mentioned earlier about making your current teams better, I think that's very true. And I think that as the skills evolve over time, really AI can just start to be used on a day-to-day basis within companies.
So I'm interested in this sort of future AI or data MBA that you mentioned. What specific classes are they going to be taking? What skills are they going to be bringing in? What makes them different from today's business management graduates?
Yeah, so I think there are some unique things around AI which do need to be understood by people making decisions with AI, and it can be around ethics, for example. It can be around bias. Again, AI is just math, right? And so you do need to have some kind of a careful approach at times, depending on the type of data, but understanding the limits and just being able to guide the business to make the best decisions, and which includes also understanding its limitations. So those, for example, would be some of the specific skills. I think they'll evolve to be able to use, just like they use Excel, and they kind of do these, very powerful visualization with tools today. It would be exactly the same sort of a thing with AI. So it kind of covers a spectrum everywhere from understanding data, understanding the limits and the potential of AI through to day-to-day working.
That's great, and I imagine too that folks listening who want to be more involved in the industry can start looking at this as well. You guys have a lot of AI focused employees. What I don't know, resume line items are you looking for that really kind of help separate people from the pack? Maybe not you particularly, but what are companies going to be looking for?
I think a lot of it just comes back to that data analytics experience. And today you might be hard pressed to look for an employee who might have 25 years of experience and AI, right? So some of this is often newer grads that might have more specific things around AI, but fundamentally I think it's those individuals that have a strong competency in data-driven decision making, and those people have been around for a long time. It's just that there's more data, there's more complexity to the data, and there's that multidisciplinary aspect of kind of critical thinking and decision making. Those are typically the things that we hear organizations are looking for in people.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting. So just as an aside, my son is actually studying data science and artificial intelligence in college right now. It is amazing the things that he's learning versus the things that folks in industry have not yet learned. So I think that, education is adapting rather quickly to this new field. And I imagine as well that we're going to see a lot more people with this kind of skills on their resume entering the workforce and, coming in to do exactly what we've been talking about this whole time. Another thing as well that I'll just comment on a couple minutes ago, you mentioned ethics and the fact that we're just dealing with data and we need people to help us to sort of understand the implications of the data. That's another topic as well that we focused on the podcast here, and I'm glad that you brought it up because that's very important to us. So if listeners are interested, go back to some of the episodes from the fall where we did quite a lot of talk about ethics and considering the implications of AI applications. So Per, I'm going to turn the page here and do something that we've been doing now just in the last few episodes, the season 2, as it were, of this podcast, a lightning round where I surprise you with some fun questions, and I just want to hear your gut reaction to some of these things. So I'm putting you on the spot. I would apologize, except we do this for everyone, so I'm not going to. So I'm just going to pick a couple questions. Give me, your 1-minute thought on each of these things. Okay, ready?
Right.
All right, good sport. Okay, here we go. How long will it take for a conventional AI to pass the Turing test and fool an average person in a conversation, like a verbal conversation?
15 years.
All right. So we're not there yet.
That order. We're not there yet. No.
All right. When will we see a full self-driving car that can drive anywhere at any time?
Great question. So I think 5 to 10 years would be my guess. That would be that'd be around that. So just as an aside, I'll surprise you a bit. My old colleagues and I, this is about 5-6 years ago, we had a running bet as to when this was going to happen. And I can tell you some had predicted 2020 and that didn't happen. So I think we're still a little bit of the ways away, but hopefully not that far because it would be great.
Well, my young daughter has decided that she doesn't need to get a driver's license because she'll just be able to tell the car where to take her. So, we'll see if that works out. Okay, one more. Are machine learning, deep learning, and artificial intelligence synonymous, or are they different?
They are subsets of one another. So machine learning is a subset of AI, and deep learning is a subset of machine learning.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. So, and thank you for joining us for the conversation today. Where can people connect with you and follow your thoughts on enterprise AI and other topics?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. This has been a great conversation, but I'd welcome people to follow me on LinkedIn and on Twitter.
All right, so just look up Per Nyberg on LinkedIn and Twitter. You'll find them there. And thank you, everyone, for listening to the Utilizing AI podcast. If you've enjoyed this discussion, remember to subscribe, rate, and review the show in iTunes, since that really does help our visibility. And please share this show with your friends. This podcast was brought to you by GestaltIT.com, your home for IT coverage across the enterprise. For show notes and more episodes, go to utilizing-ai.com, or you can find us on Twitter at utilizing_AI. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.